Let me introduce myself. I'm just a fisherman. I'm probably 98% of the fishermen out there. I don't belong to any organized fishing group or fishing organization, which probably comprises about 2% of fishermen. What I do represent is a lot of people who like to go out and recreate and enjoy fishing. We don't want to read complicated regulations, and we don't really care how many spots our fish has on it, or whether it's a huge fish every time we catch it, or if we have to catch a certain number of fish per hour. All we want to do is go fishing, have simple regulations, so that we don't have to worry that we're violating some law or going to be arrested by an officer and pay a heavy fine. We just want a relaxing day to enjoy the outdoors with our families. With that being said, it has come to my attention that the regional advisory councils have had discussion on raising the trout limit from 4 fish daily in possession to an 8 fish possession limit. I completely agree with this and applaud the division for considering this action. The only thing that I disagree with is how it will be implemented. I am an advocate of keeping the law simple. The current proposal splits the possession limit into 2 daily limits. It also regulates how I must take care of the fish and how I can store my fish. Filleting a fish at the cleaning station will become a thing of the past because you can no longer fillet the fish on the day that you catch it. If you're just out on a one-day fishing trip, you will have to take your fish home whole to fillet it. I've always been an advocate of keeping things simple and promoting the sport. What I would like to see is a return to the 2001 trout limit, which states that the trout limit is 8 fish daily and in possession. Or even simpler, the trout limit is 8 fish in possession at any time. I know there might be some apprehension about just doubling the Utah state fishing limit, but let's take a look at it. If we look at our surrounding states, Utah has one of the best hatchery systems, yet the most restrictive trout limit. Utah comes in last place among the surrounding states for the number of fish that a person can possess. Now let's look at fishing license sales. This data, as reported to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service database, shows the license sales for the state of Utah. The mark of around 450,000 anglers has been what has been normal for the state of Utah. What gets really interesting is to take this graph and break it down into events that have taken place in relation to license sales. If we look at the years 1965 to 1989, we see that the trout limit was reduced in 1967 from 10 fish to 8 fish. Apparently this didn't affect the buying public very much, as the license purchases remained flat. I cannot explain what happened in 1978. However, in 1983, when the additional purchase of a trout stamp was required, the license purchases dipped below the average that was set from 1974 to 1982. In 1985, the state of Utah went to year-round fishing. License sales apparently gives minor approval to that. In 1986, the trout stamp was repealed. Now you didn't have to buy a license plus a stamp. License sales again gave an approval to that. This seems to be a trend that I found across the board. It's not so much the increase in the price of the license, it's the complexity of the regulation and the number of steps it takes to get one. Next, I decided to look at license sales before and after the division initiated the 4 fish trout limit, taking about a decade prior and a decade after. In 1994, with a lot of advertising and fanfare, the division introduced Free Fishing Day. As you can see, license purchasers responded positively to that. In 1996, rather than just adding a license increase, the division added a habitat authorization. In effect, people had to purchase a license to purchase a license, adding an extra step to the process. Not only did purchasers not get a pretty stamp to go on their license like the trout stamp, now they had an additional piece of paper they had to keep track of in their wallet. As you can see, license purchasers did not respond favorably to this. In 2002, Wildlife Resources cut the trout limit in half, from 8 fish to 4 fish. The state said that it had surveyed fishermen and had a broad support for the reduction in the fish limit. However, license anglers gave their real vote with their license dollars. The state lost almost 51,000 anglers that year. The next year, The state also added complicated regulations at Strawberry, one of its most popular fisheries. That year the state lost another 34,000 plus anglers, giving a 2-year net loss of over 85,000 anglers. Reeling from the loss in anglers over the last 2 years, the state started the Take Me Fishing campaign. They tagged all of their emails with Take Me Fishing. They tagged all of their voicemails with Take Me Fishing. They sent out invitations for people to buy fishing licenses. Obviously, a little bit of advertising worked. Unfortunately, that big push dropped off the next year, and license sales declined again. In 2007, the major change was the new 2-pole permit. Now, for a small fee, you could get a permit to do what had been illegal in Utah for the last 150 years. It appears that license purchasers responded positively to this change. In 2008, big game hunters were required to purchase either a small game license or a combination license before they could apply for the big game drawing. It appears that many of those hunters decided that the combination license was the better deal, and you can see that fishing license numbers have risen. The final assessment is that it took 9+ years to get license sales back to where they were when the division had an 8-fish limit. Now the question is, are there enough fish to go around to all the anglers? Let's take a look at the DWR stocking data. This graph shows the total number of trout stocked by the Division of Wildlife Resources since 2002, when the 4-fish limit went in place. It also breaks out how many of those trout were rainbow trout and how many of those trout were catchable rainbow trout. From 2007 to current, there has been an average of about 500,000 more fish stocked than when the division went to the 4-fish limit in 2002, peaking at almost 1 million more fish stocked in 2010. Now add to that this statistic published in the 2010 Utah Fishing Guide. It states that anglers now release 72% of their catch, in contrast with anglers keeping 75% of their catch in the year 2000. That means that catchable rainbow trout harvest would look something like this if we applied the 2002 statistic to it, showing what is harvested and the margin that would be left over to either stay in the lake or would winter kill. Now if we overlay the 2009 fish harvest on the 2002 fish harvest, you can see the additional fish that aren't being harvested. This would mean that many more fish are either being left in the lake for a following year or they're dying from winter kill. So let's summarize. We are barely getting back to the number of fishermen we had when we had an 8-fish limit. We are planting more fish than we were planting when we went to the 4-fish limit. And we have more people turning fish back than were turning fish back when we went to the 4-fish limit. So I believe we can justify an 8-fish limit. And I believe we can also justify allowing people to catch those 8 fish in one day if they so desire. So let's take a look at the recommendations for the regulation. The simplest one, 8 fish in possession. The pros, you can catch any number of fish on any day. You can fillet your fish in the field. It's an easy regulation to understand, and it's an easy regulation to enforce. Option number 2, 4 fish daily, 8 fish in possession. The pros, you can catch up to 8 fish after 2 days. The cons, you can't fillet your fish in the field. Fewer fish in possession in a daily catch. It's a more difficult regulation to understand, and it's a more difficult regulation for officers to enforce. In option number 3, you can have up to 12 fish in possession after 3 days, but the cons remain the same. You can't fillet your fish in the field. Fewer fish possible in a daily catch. More difficult regulation to understand and a difficult regulation to enforce. I'd like to thank any board members or RAC Council members that took the time out of their busy day to watch this video. I hope you find it useful in your consideration of setting the next fishing regulation for 2014.